Hello, welcome back to the What Problem Are You Solving podcast, where we believe that finding out what problem you're trying to solve quickly turns into what pays. We're two lean startup coaches that have a passion for quickly delivering value before you spend too much. So, my name is John Ruark. I'm a lean startup coach in the DC metro area and happy to be here. And with me, as always, is Mr. Ty.
How are you? Smith. How you doing?
Man,
Long
good.
time no see, John. How you been, man?
I know, it's crazy. We had a little hiatus since the last time we've had an episode, but in that time frame, a lot's gone on to include COVID-19, to include the birth of my fifth child, to include like murder hornets. It's just been madness, big old things.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
But we thought we'd try to kick things back off because innovation doesn't go away just because the world changes. And that's what we wanted to talk about tonight. So, Ty, anything else you want to talk about yourself before we get into it?
Yeah. I mean, the whole idea that the world has not changed, that innovation doesn't go away, I think is a really super important idea, particularly if you think about innovation in a changing world, in a completely turned upside down world where what you thought yesterday was still in work you need to have a space where you can do some innovation around that. You can rethink the possibilities of what's going on. So we got to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. So anyway, since we had our last episode, which has been over 3 months ago, so we're now recording this mid-June. Since about mid-March, the world has locked down with COVID-19, and very quickly, when you have massive policy changes that basically shut down businesses, as at least according to the status quo, that really impacts what you can do. And so I think one thing I'd like to talk about tonight is how can businesses react in the sake of COVID-19? Because if they don't, then what happens, Ty?
Yeah, so what you end up with is any biological system, the capacity or the inability to react to new inputs, COVID-19, uprisings around the country, massive geopolitical changes around the world. All of these things are going to impact, and those entities that we would otherwise call companies that don't have the capacity to adapt will die. And so if you're willing to have your organization die, go for it.
Yeah, don't do anything.
Exactly. And so I think that's an important conversation that we all need to start having.
Absolutely. And so, in the beginning of this thing, where there was so much uncertainty, so much fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and we really didn't know what this was going to look like, we had sweeping policies of, businesses, that were not essential, being told to stop doing business.
Right.
We just had massive unemployment that we haven't seen in decades, well, at least a decade or so. So this is really the opportunity for even a stable business to stop and think, what can we do differently? So you could wear the woe is me hat and say, oh, well, I guess after 30 years of business, I'm going to have to shut my doors. And many businesses are. And yet we believe as lean startup coaches, like, you are now startup, because what worked for your business in the past is in the past. And today is day one of a brand new company that has to live in a different environment.
Yeah. The guy that we follow, Steve Blank, that 3.5-time billionaire, father of the lean startup grandfather, the godfather of the lean startup movement, would suggest that those organizations that don't have the capacity to rethink, to immediately go, so what is the new situation, and then shift their thinking, their strategy, their organizational design, all of those pieces, their funding strategies are going to be in danger of going out of business. I think that there's going to be major fallout from this. There are going to be some massive companies, airlines and hotels that are going to take just a straight butt kicking off of this stuff, that if they don't start to rethink what it means to have a massive amount of capital and facilities that they have to take, overhead that they have to plan for, you start to think about strategically, they're going to take a wash. I mean, I just read that Starbucks, all over the world, Starbucks is going to permanently close 400 of their shops.
Wow. So that brings up a good point.
Shops.
I mean, we have the obvious examples of, well, if you have travel bans, then anything travel related, hotels, flights, those businesses are completely decimated. Yeah. But yet, even if you're a stable business, even if you're an essential business, your business model still has to change. And I'm glad you brought up Steve Blank, because since he started writing in the post-COVID era, one of my favorite articles, he says, basically, if you don't believe that your current business model has been disrupted, you're lying to yourself.
Exactly.
Paraphrasing him. Which
exactly.
Even so, okay. Well, how can Walmart say, "Hey, we're essential. We're still open. We're still having people come in," but yet with all the social distancing guidelines, with all of the restrictions that are being put on, something has to change. It may not be as drastic to Walmart as it would be to a mom and pop shop, but either way, the business model has to change. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that. What does it say about the strategy that got you to where you are by early March?
Yeah, so strategy is a funny thing. I think most of us consider strategy. I was having a conversation with another colleague that's in the lean startup world, and he was saying that even as and he works all over the world, literally all over the world, some major companies, and he and I were having a conversation about strategy. And our experience, John and I, you and I experiences with strategy is more related to people saying, this is what we want to do. They write this strategy up and it ends up somewhere on a shelf, and it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't make any sense, right? And so when they think they're doing strategy, they're just doing theater, right? and the test of whether or not their strategy works is when they enter this really dark, depressive place of COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
Will their strategy survive the weight of a truly need for an adaptive change? And so if they are to survive, they need to figure out whether or not it has the shelf life. And so you and I have experience with this concept of blue ocean strategy, mm-hmm. right? That says, if I am caught already in a very bloody, and we're going to
competitive
sharks,
mm-hmm.
competitive, thank you, environment, when something drastic happens, when there is a seismic shift in the market, and we usually think of seismic shifts like technology shifts, but mm-hmm. we're talking about COVID-19, which is an environmental, like an ecological shift, cataclysmic shift mm-hmm. in some ways. If you have the right strategy where you're not competing in the same competitive market, you can survive. An example being Southwest Airlines. When Southwest Airlines was first starting, they were going after very different uncontested space. Blue Ocean Strategy says, here's my uncontested space. And so they went after that space, and as they were doing it, they figured out nobody else is playing in the space. As a matter of fact, we're going to play in it so hard that people cannot replicate our space. As a matter of fact, I think it was Delta tried to, and I don't remember the name of their low-cost competitive airline, but they tried to compete in that same space, and they could not replicate it.
Wow.
Aha. Guess what happened when 9/11 comes along? They shut down airlines.
Right.
They shut down long hauls. They shut down multiple hubbed experiences. What do we know about Southwest? They go from point to point. Quick turnaround, point to point. They were still making money in that 3 or 4 months after 9/11.
Right. Because that business model wasn't impacted that way because they specifically designed it for a specific revenue stream. That's interesting.
Ha. And so we start off this idea of our business models, can they survive this thing that we're all experienced around COVID-19? Some that have the leadership to be adaptive will then say, I think that we can. There's something different that we can offer up to the world that will be planful about it, right? That will be really, truly planful about it. And so those that can survive will be the ones that will say, where are the customers at that we don't know about now?
Right, and that's a great segue into the point that I was going to bring up, is that the blue ocean post-COVID, like, again, one mindset you could have is the fixed mindset where woe is me, I guess I can't do my business anymore, whereas a more growth mindset would look at it and say, okay, what am I really good at doing, and where is my market headed? So
yes.
So if you just accept the fact that you can't control these policies, but you notice everyone's starting to telecommute, everyone's starting to work from home, everyone's stuck at home but still want to see grandma. Wait a minute. Now you can look at Zoom, Google Meet, MS Teams, Microsoft Teams. All of these businesses have flourished in less than 3 months because they are quickly, and it's amazing to see this competition going on right now of something that was a nice to have, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, and now it's almost a requirement for businesses now to have a stable, scalable video infrastructure that anyone can use, very simple and intuitive. And the best part is that, okay, strategy one is go where the people are, right? Make sure that you have a video tool, but now there's dozens. I saw a list on the internet of like something on the order of like 50 different video tools. Okay, so now it's getting to become a red ocean space.
Wow.
So now the question becomes, in that video market, how do I find the blue ocean within that? How do I do something that's so different? What's my unique value that I'm going to create? So it becomes a new way of how do you innovate on something that you may not have innovated on before.
Well, it's interesting you would say that because the blue ocean, it follows the line of disruptive innovation, and Chandler McBride would talk about that some of these innovations are not completely like radically new offerings, right? They are good enough offerings. They find the adjacent market until they can roll over and become the lead in the market. And so we know from the blue ocean, we know from that the blue ocean methodology. They talk about iPod versus Zune. The Zune was the first MP3 type popular MP3 type player, but what Jobs was so good at was to think about, okay, so what are the adjacent jobs to be done? Right? What are people really trying to do? Which is among all of these strategies and trying to figure out how do you create space in the market is what are the jobs to be done that are not being satisfied right now. And so if I were a Zoom, which apparently their market cap has increased like 500%.
Yeah,
right. They're
it's insane.
$2 billion in market cap. What they were able to do was start to think about that previously. Like, what is the job to be done of a person who's going to access this video conferencing technology? What are people really trying to do? Because I don't know about you, I really dig in Google Meet. The experience that I've had with Zoom versus WebEx versus Teams is vastly different,
right?
Because they are creating experiences that other people can't have. So I can see them strategically going out and buying a mural or a Miro, right? Going out and creating space that people can do things that are like they would have in the traditional non-virtual experience, going out and tapping into that.
Well, if you remember, there was a strategic move they did that I thought was fascinating. It did not get a lot of press time, surprisingly, because it's still niche. But remember, they, about a month or two ago, had a partnership with Otter.ai, which is a voice dictation service. So they said for their premium tier, right, it's not for your free users, but as an extra perk, if you upgrade to these higher tier levels of Zoom, you get free, or free with the cost, audio transcription of every meeting. Hey, we're having lots of online meetings now, and it's hard to remember who was where and what was said. Congratulations, you now get a written copy of everything that was said in that meeting and by whom, and it's searchable, it's indexable. And so they had some strategy about where the market was going, more businesses are going to be doing more work, right? Their network traffic has gone up, their stock has gone up. They know that businesses are shifting toward this way, and that's an additional unique value proposition that their competitors don't have yet.
So what's interesting about what you're offering up in terms of strategy is that a strategy should be market creative.
Ooh, I like that.
It's creating markets.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just responding to markets. Most of our strategies now are in response to markets.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, we talk about kind of leading the market, but very few people, very few businesses have that insight to kind of steer the market, right? It's usually reactive, not proactive, right? Well, everyone's going online. I guess I'll create another, video tool. Like, I mean, for example,
Exactly.
Microsoft Teams is a little late to the party in comparison to these other tools, and yet, why did Microsoft decide to go that way? Microsoft is not really known as a video streaming tool. They bought Skype a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
but there was more of an acquisition, not an integration. Okay, so
Right.
so now, like, nobody thinks of Microsoft as a video company. They think of it as a business productivity company, which might also do video. Why would they? Why would they be wasting time building out this new platform when there's other people that are already at it instead of doubling down on what works?
Yeah. I really am just coming to the realization, sitting here having this conversation, that about the power of strategy to create markets, not just respond to markets. Which is interesting, knowing that the Blue Ocean strategy is about market creating. You're creating, literally, they talk about how to create markets. And most of it is because you have been very, very customer focused on the job to be done, solving specific pains for your customers. And in some ways, the risk of being in business is that I could develop a strategy that I think would work because I think I paid attention to the customers well enough that could fall flat on its face.
Mm-hmm.
That's the nature of entrepreneurship, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I could do something that makes no sense otherwise.
Yeah, and you used a term earlier, which I love, alluding to creative destruction, right? And that was first kind of coined by Joseph Schumpeter, who is an Austrian economist, and kind of leading this theory of creative destruction, meaning that in order for you to grow, you have to destroy something, or something has to make space for you to create something new, right? You can't give 110%. You have to give up 10% somewhere so you can fill that with something new. And and that's really where we are now in Blue Ocean strategy, because the core of Blue Ocean strategy are, what are the things that you remove, what are the things that you eliminate, or they call it eliminate, create, raise,
reduce, raise, and create.
Reduce, raise, and create. And so you have to think of those four dials of how I'm making space. What am I? It's like when you think, you even told me about the metaphor of a water balloon, right? You squeeze one side, the other side has to expand. So how are you adjusting? What are you taking away so that you can inflate the other side? The same is true for your businesses. We've heard terms floated both in the government and out of the government about things like reimagining new ways of doing business, reconstituting establishing the new normal, recovering and making sure that's stable. But we rarely hear of this fourth R, which should be, Ty,
Remove.
what are you stopping?
Remove.
What are you getting rid of that you were just doing it because it was kind of working, but you didn't really want to mess with it? Sorry.
Yeah. I think that
Time to change.
This idea of removing stuff is so important because you have now started to rethink, how do you approach your market? Right? If we know, particularly in the COVID-19, just seismic, truly seismic changes in the way organizations are creating value. If you still have not thought about what do we let go of to get to something. I was listening to Reid Hoffman's Masters of Scale. Reid Hoffman's Masters of Scale. It's way before COVID-19. And I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he is now the CEO of Etsy. And he had grown up in Skype and a bunch of other places. And he had a conversation one of his very first acts was to look at one of his more supposedly profitable, and it was kind of kitschy. It was like cool, 150 person unit doing research and around how to do, I think it was called Etsy Studio. Etsy Studio. And he walked in, he said, can you meet this particular market demand? And they were like, no. He's like, great, love you, but we got to move on and do something else with this.
Yeah.
Because you are not meeting where we need to go.
But Ty, that's not popular. You don't make friends by closing down business segments. I mean, that's going to hurt people's feelings, and I don't really like making those kind of decisions because it doesn't feel good, and people get angry at you. So what do I?
That's the nature of leadership.
There you go. Which that's buried behind. That's buried behind all this. Because we can talk academically about what should you do as far as strategy, but that means you actually got to do it. You actually have to have the leadership qualities. You should have the authority. You should have the psychologically safe environment to know that people can bring up these issues. Like, there's a lot to unpack there, but you still have to make hard decisions, especially in times like this. And I think I'm going to assume that some businesses are really going to fall on their face because they're not ready to make those hard decisions, and they have to.
Yeah, and hard decisions, like you said, are not easy because you're messing with people's livelihoods, right? Being able to, especially in a time when we're at 21% unemployment.
Right.
I gotta eat. I want to make sure my children eat.
Right.
And at the same time, how do organizations make those really hard decisions? How does and I'd be curious, how did Starbucks make the decision to close 400 stores, 200 of them in Canada?
Wow.
Is it because they understand where the market is? I would hope so. I hope that it's not arbitrary. I would hope that all of these organizations are really thinking about how do we continue to create value? How do we maximize the resources that we have? How do we grow markets? And it's funny because I think about we're going to close 200 stores permanently. I'm always curious about what permanently means. That means you're sending people home, we're never going to open up again, or when the market rebounds because it is cyclical.
Right.
What will happen as a result of them showing up differently?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of when like Toys R Us started to go under. I kept reading news feed every other week was like, oh, now they've announced 50 more stores are closing, 50 more here, and you could kind of see the tidal wave coming, but the locations they chose seemed very arbitrary, because they didn't have a strategy of how to recover. It was just, crap, we got to save some money for the next 2 weeks. Okay, these 50. It was very clear they did not have a plan, a strategy, and look where they are today.
Right. I don't know. I think that the one good thing that may come out of the COVID-19, maybe, because it was such a drastic lesson as opposed to what happened in during the Depression era, right? Mm-hmm. These were very, in the Depression era, very industrial environments where the skill of the labor was just, can I crank a wrench? Didn't require much other than that. It was very industrial, some post-industrial. Mm-hmm. We are now in an information age where knowledge is what's driving. And so I'm curious about the speed of recovery around knowledge and what will be the next turn in the industry with respect to how we're going to recover, and what will be the strategic markers that we've done the right thing. Yeah,
and I'm biased. I think that Agile is one of many solutions to help get you there, and I think Agile as a business practice can be a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Because if you look at how, let's just say, Google Meet is trying to keep up with Zoom had the first mover advantage, and yet Google Meet is adding the same features at a very rapid pace. You can clearly tell they're doing some sort of agile development, releasing new features incrementally. And so in an information age, people just don't become stupid because they lost their job. That knowledge, that domain knowledge, can be used somewhere else, maybe in a different capacity. Maybe you're not working on medical equipment anymore. Maybe you have to shift toward automotive equipment. But you can you haven't become dumb. You just transfer that knowledge, apply it a little bit differently, and iterate on what works and applying that across fields. We're big fans of looking at cross-market ideation, if that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. That what if we did blockchain for GeoInt, or what if we did philosophy for Chef Boyardee? You know, like whatever that is. Right. How you can take these what seem to be unrelated markets and create new value that people hadn't even thought of before. That's an opportunity. That's a blue ocean for any disruption that's going on right now.
Yeah, in the blue ocean framework, there are 6 levers of blue ocean, and one of them is to look across boundaries, look across market boundaries, industry boundaries. So, what is happening for us? Well, as part of this conversation, what's happening in the launch space? Think SpaceX.
Oh, yeah.
How they're turning it over to help us understand how to deliver better services in healthcare, right? As a lever to figure out whether or not we're doing that, we're finding all of the spaces where the customers live. Your story helped me think about this, not ever thinking about I have to maximize and squeeze all the juice out of this particular silo, even when the evidence says it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. What do we know about Alexa? Alexa came out of the Amazon Fire Phone.
What's a Fire Phone?
Your Fire Phone. Exactly. It lasted all of a year, maybe.
If that. Yeah.
And now all that technology went into the Alexa. It was never, we're not going to shut it down and lose all that sparks. Bezos, to his credit, said, we have that information. What did we learn? And we need to learn it fast, quick, and do something with it.
Yeah, can we take voice engineers and get them working on something else? Hey, what about a speaker you could talk to? Let's try it, right? And off they go.
And so that is that to me is a specific call for strategy. Mm-hmm. How you think about your strategy.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and to that point, voice engineering, voice and artificial intelligence was the core strategic component. The output may have changed. It was no longer a phone. It may have been smart dialing. It's now a smart speaker. It's got more interactive, order things through your voice. So you have to be less locked on the outputs, but really determine what is your competitive advantage from like an IP perspective.
I love it. I love it. That is strategy at its best. Like what problem are you trying to solve?
Right.
Thinking about, tongue in cheek, what pays, right?
Right.
But really thinking about what would winning look like if you really did this right? What would winning look like in the market, both as a competitor in the market and as a provider of service to the market? Competitor in the market and provider of service to the market. And so winning for the company or the organization and winning for the customer, because they're symbiotically attached. Right? They are paired. Mm-hmm. They aren't strangers to one another. And so I think doing something like that is pretty powerful. Mm-hmm. Pretty powerful.
All right. So any final thoughts on this concept of disruption in this new age in the past 3 months?
Just the last thought. When organizations get disrupted, they go through a period of mourning. But those that mourn in a way to learn will survive. Those that mourn in a way to appeal to the past will go under.
I couldn't have said it better myself, and that's a quotable quote right there. So thank you for sharing that. That's a good way to kind of cap the whole conversation and realize it's not just about technology. It's about how do you shift your strategy, because you no longer can avoid disruption. We are all being disrupted, and those who can adapt will win, right? It's survive or die. With that, that's it for this week's What Pays podcast. And remember, life's too short to waste time, effort, and money figuring out what to build next. So figure out what pays. Thanks, and good night.
Baby. Good night, everybody. Good night, Jen.
Good night.